Baldy, a tale from Scandinavia. Lars was a man who always had a smile on his face. You'd often hear him say, "I have little money, but I've got lots of time." It was true. He used his time well. He worked things out and made things work. It's not surprising that Lars would be the one to take on the challenge of the farm down Nykobing Way. It had changed hands more often than most people change clothes. No sooner did a family move in than they would find themselves hurrying to leave. Some folks said it was on account of the soil. It was too soggy or too sour or too shallow to grow a proper crop or pasture animals. Other folks said the place was haunted. None of the villagers could seem to agree on the problem, but they all agreed Lars was wasting his time, effort, and money investing in that place. However, Lars paid their stories no heed. He was thrilled that at long last there was a farm he could afford to buy. He emptied every last coin from his pocket to pay for it and gladly took the keys. It was almost dusk when Lars arrived. Even in the dim light, he could see that the fields and pasture lands were barren and bald. As he walked through the gate, he called out, "Good evening, Baldy." To his great surprise, he heard a gruff voice reply, "Hello to you too." Or was he imagining it? He wasn't sure, but just in case, he decided to call back. If there's someone out there, you are invited to join me for dinner on Christmas Eve." Soon, Lars forgot everything about his unusual introduction to the farm. He was just too busy. He repaired the stable to protect his cow, pig, and sheep from the cold. He patched up the tumble-down fences so the animals could go out to pasture. He fed and watered the animals. He harvested the scrawny vegetables and plowed the fields and seeded a cover crop. And then the repairs began again. There never was a dull moment. One chore or another was always waiting to be done. By the time Christmas arrived, Lars was ready for a rest and a celebration of hard work. He roasted the fattest goose he could find, caramelized a few potatoes, and chopped a red cabbage very finely. He was about to sit down to his special meal when he heard a knock at the door. He hurried to open it and looked all around. No one was there. Just in case, he called out, "Good evening and Happy Christmas to you." A gruff voice replied, "I've come for dinner." Lars looked more carefully and finally saw a little man, not much higher than Lars's knee. His nose was hooked, his beard was long and gray. He wore a red jacket, gray striped trousers, black clogs, and a little red hat. Lars's visitor was not a person, but a small and magical elf called a nisse in Danish. And when the nisse pulled off his cap, Lars saw that he was as bald as the land had been. Soon the two sat together at the table sharing food. Lars made conversation and joked, a little nervously. Baldy, that was the niece's name, didn't say much, but he seemed to enjoy himself, smacking his lips. Suddenly, Baldy stood up to leave and announced, "On New Year's Eve, I'll serve you food. Come to the stable." When the time came, Lars wondered if he had misunderstood. He couldn't see the little man at the stable anywhere. Just in case, he called out, "Happy New Year's Eve to you." Baldy emerged from behind a large rock. "This way," was all he said. Lars followed him down a narrow, winding tunnel, and soon entered a chamber glowing with candlelight. Baldy served salt cod and green leeks, a perfect New Year's meal. Lars eagerly sat at the table. But just as he was about to take his first bite, Baldy suddenly grabbed Lars's plate right out from under his spoon. Lars was stunned. Before he could protest, though, a great big black drop of goo fell from the ceiling to the table, exactly where Lars's plate had been. "Thank you for rescuing my meal," Lars exclaimed. He moved over to sit up against the wall of the cave. The two ate in silence, watching as more and more dark liquid oozed out of the ceiling and dripped onto the table. "We've got to do something about that. Perhaps I could patch up the ceiling." "Won't help," grunted Baldy. "What's causing the leak? Is there a creek I could divert? Is there a pond nearby?" "It's your animals." "My animals?" Suddenly Lars understood that they were directly beneath the stable. The dark liquid was more unpleasant than he'd realized. "Perhaps I could dig out a new home for you. I could make it bigger if you like, round, square, whatever shape you want. It could be on the other side of the farmyard." "No," snarled the niece. "My home has been here for 1,000 years." "Oh," said Lars. His mind started whirling. "You'd like me to move the stable, wouldn't you?" "Indeed," responded Baldy. The next day, brick by brick, board by board, Lars began to move the stable, all the way over to the other side of the farmyard, as far as possible from Baldy's home. He worked long and hard until at last he was able to move his animals into their new dwelling. A month later, Lars began to notice his cow had grown plump. The sheep's wool had thickened up, and his pig had a lovely rosy glow. What's more, that spring every seed he sowed sprouted. Come summer, his rye and oats grew taller and thicker than the grains grown by any of his neighbors. Folks from far and wide dropped by. They all wanted to know his secret. Lars would only say, "It took time to work things out and make things work." Our church is a lot like a farm. It takes effort to cultivate it properly. Now, taking that metaphor further, today I am wondering, who are you in this story? Are you Lars, willing to take the time and effort to work things out and make things work? Are you Baldy, someone who has always been a part of this farm but is often overlooked? Are you the previous owners who, by ignorance or stubbornness, have refused to put the effort in to change? Or are you the townspeople, adamant such efforts are fruitless? Or maybe you have filled different roles throughout your time at our church. Reflect on this answer and then share it with a family member or friend this week. Or if you feel so called, share it during coffee hour after the service.